If you're building your ABA company and you're tired of guessing, this is for you. We built the BCBA blueprint to give you real structure, systems, and support without the fluff. Details are in the description.
All right, welcome everybody. We've got Dr. Alex Faucheux on today. He's the founder of ABA Exam Review, and we'll give everybody a little bit more time to get in before we actually start the live stream, but we are live right now. We'll do something fun just to let everyone know where the chat is. So drop your location and what temperature it is. So throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the same chat where I just asked you to list your state and your current temperature. And I'll make sure that these questions get to Dr. Faucheux. We're going to give it a few minutes to let people join a little bit late. 65 and 76. 79 sounds nice. It's super hot here. Yeah, I'm excited about this. This is one of our biggest webinars that we put together. So this is exciting. Seems like exam review is a hot topic.
Yeah, should be fun. Hopefully we can help some people today.
All right, so I'll go ahead and introduce. So we have Dr. Alex Faucheux on today. His PhD, MBA, BCBA, over 10 years of experience in paraprofessional training, parent training, supervision, treatment planning and assessment, and has worked across clinical, school, home settings with children ages 2 to 18 with autism. So tons of experience here. I actually came across the YouTube channel, his ABA Exam Review YouTube channel, and that's what kind of piqued my interest because we have a community chat in our Facebook group just on BCBA study group and RBT study group. And just a heads up, those chats are going to be going away. Facebook is removing community chats from groups. So if you want to continue the conversations, follow his YouTube channel. And also we have a community chat on our other platform that I can send the link to anybody who's interested in joining that. But the community chats are going away. So if you want to post a question, there won't be separated conversations anymore. You'll have to post them in the feed in the Facebook group if you found this through our Facebook group. If you're not in our ABA Business Challenges Facebook group, make sure you join. I'll drop the link in the chat in a minute. But so back to Dr. Alex Faucheux. He's a PhD in special education with a concentration in ABA and early childhood education. That is earned it from University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And when it comes to the ABA Exam Review, he's helped thousands of RBTs and BCBAs pass their certification exams. The YouTube channel is awesome. I see him posting content all the time, so definitely choose YouTube channel if you're not already. And it's straightforward, prep-focused on fluency, question drilling, simulated exams, and video-based learning. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Faucheux, and let's learn a little bit about RBT and BCBA exams.
All right, thanks, Josh, and thanks everybody for joining. As Josh said, I am Dr. Alex Faucheux. I've got my PhD at UNLV and worked in Las Vegas in ABA for about 10 years. So almost 15 years in the field now. I run ABA Exam Review. We're one of the industry leaders in RBT and BCBA exam prep. And so today we're just going to go over some of the basic data behind the exam, and then I'm going to give you some of what we've seen are 5-6 years now in business, and what has worked and what hasn't, and what we think you should be doing to try and or help your organization. Whatever your situation may be, we hope you find some value in this. Just as a caveat, remember, we are an individualistic science, right? And so what I'm recommending here, it works for many people. It might not work for you, and that's okay. Part of the studying process is figuring out what is going to be effective. How are you going to achieve your goal of passing your exam or helping your staff pass their exams? So with that said, please ask questions throughout the presentation. If you have any, we'll also do a Q&A at the end, but feel free to jump in and I'll try to answer it the best I can. Let's start with the trends. Now, we are going back to 2020. Obviously, COVID had a big impact on test takers. So looking forward, we have the last 5 years here. The top statistics are the RBT exam, the bottom are the BCBA exams. And you can see it is growing. So the field is growing steadily. But what we really want to look at is the percentage of passing. And to me, this trend of downward and over here, downward, where the first-time takers are failing more frequently, could be due to a few different things. It's unclear why. We do have more candidates testing with more options and more distractions and more ways to test. So there could be several different reasons why that is occurring, but what's important to you is that the rate is dropping. So the exam has not gotten easier. It's arguably not gotten more difficult, despite what some people might say, but less people are passing, which means for you is you need to focus more and more on prioritizing your studies. Because if we look then to retakes, that number becomes even worse. 36% pass, and BCBA is only 25%. We're going to talk a little bit about why we believe that to be the case and what we've seen from some of our students. Takeaways here. Now I'm going to frame a lot of this through the lens of the BCBA exam. It's the longer exam. It's the harder exam. But all of this applies as well to the RBT exam. So if we look at that, a 54% pass rate. And back when I took the exam, this was as high as 66, 67% sometimes. So it's almost a 20% drop percentage of candidates who pass their first time. And we're not looking at that number as a way to make you nervous or make you think the test is harder than it's going to be, but it's the reality, right? We want to be very honest with ourselves, and it is a very difficult exam. Done, obviously, a lot of schooling, and many of you have done a lot of schooling, and y'all are educated people, and you've probably done well on tests. I can easily say this is probably the most difficult exam I've taken. It's extremely applied, and it's going to be difficult if you're not prepared. So we're going to talk about how we can overcome those difficulties. Again, even more importantly, this is retake pass rate, 20%, and that's extremely low. And people taking the exam over and over again. Once they fail, then their study habits become even worse, or they approach the test the wrong way. So our goal here really today is we're not going through the task list necessarily. We're not going to practice terms and definitions, but we're going to take away ideas on what you can do when you're studying to better prepare yourself for the exam. Because there are a lot of companies out there now doing exam preparation. Some are really good, some aren't so good. And so you want to be careful because you can find yourself spending a lot of money, a lot of time getting nowhere. So with that said, let's start with some of the challenges, okay? First, like we talked about, the pass rate trends. The exam, I don't believe has gotten any harder. Now, the task list just changed, so we don't have 25 data yet. And maybe once that 25 data comes out with the new task list, we'll learn a little more. But that same task list for the BCBA exam was there for a few years. The RBT task list has been the same for a very long time. That's going to change next year. But the point being is, even though it hasn't changed, the material hasn't changed, those pass rates are going down. So we've got to figure out why. And I think the main reason. And I'm not here to give you quick tips and tricks. We're just going to be honest about it, is a failure to prepare. As hard as the exam is, and people admit the exam is hard, they'll admit to themselves the exam is hard, and they still find a way to under prepare. Especially for the BCBA exam, if that's what you're going to take, let's say in 6 months, you really got to prioritize that. It's got to be one of the top priorities in your life. If you are going to become a BCBA, that's going to be your career, right? And passing the exam is incredibly important until you get that certification. And the RBT is the same way. You can't get billed as an RBT. You can't get billed as a BCBA. You're not going to be able to make the money that RBTs and BCBAs make. And if you're a BCBA, you're not going to be able to do and have the responsibilities and the perks of having that title, right? So you've got to pass that exam. What I found interesting is that the thousands, and this is BCBA data, the thousands of BCBAs who come, buy our materials, and we provide digital exams, we provide offline exams. Less than 10% of the customers take every digital mock available, right? So think about that. For our 6th edition, we currently have three exams, and then the 5th edition, we had 5 exams. So right now we have 8 exams total. This data hasn't changed from 5th to 6th edition. It hasn't changed as more exams were added. When we had 3 total exams, less than 10%. Now it's 8, it's still less than 10%. Less than 20% even take one of the digital exams in full. So think about that. We're paying money, we're perceivably spending time on these study materials, and they're not even getting done. And so if you're not even utilizing the materials, and then you come back and wonder why you failed, we can look at the data, and the data show that you didn't even utilize the materials in full. So that right there should, I think, be a warning bell to everyone, is you've got to prepare, right? And you can't lie to yourself about your preparation. You've got to be honest with yourself. How are you preparing? If you're not taking simulated full digital mocks, no distractions, no boyfriends, no girlfriends, no pets, no friends, 4 hours, and you're simulating that test environment, you're just not doing it correctly. And RBTs as well, right? It's a shorter exam, shorter questions, same pressure on test day. That's got to be the priority, getting to the point where you're finding the time to take a full digital mock. Number 2 is skipping fluency. And we're going to go into more detail on each of these, but skipping fluency. At the end of the day, this is a fluency exam. Both of them, RBT and BCBA, are fluency exams. And if we aren't fluent, meaning if I say negative reinforcement and you can't tell me what that means and then explain it to me, well, you're in trouble. And you might say negative reinforcement, that's a principle. It's one of the basic ideas. How hard can that be? And you'd be very surprised about people who fail either the RBT or BCBA exam, and they come talk to us, and we talk to them, and we just do a quick fluency check. That's how we start every meeting or every one-on-one, is quick fluency check. More often than not, fluency is not there. So let's start with that idea. Your first 2 weeks of study time, and this is framed around BCBA, the RBT study window is going to be shorter, just it's an easier exam. The BCBA window, there's no right or wrong way. Don't ask somebody to don't pay somebody to make a study schedule for you, because they don't know you. They don't know your life. They don't know how you study. That's a waste of money to pay somebody to make a study schedule for you. Now, they're going to help you create one as part of a package or for free. That's different. But don't pay someone to make your study schedule. Only you really know your time, your availability, and how much time you're really going to spend. With that said, wherever you start and however long you plan to spend studying, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year, the first 2 weeks need to be on fluency. Now, assumingly you've gone through a master's program plus the ABA coursework, if you're going to take that BCBA or BCABA exam. And what happens is you take all your classes, you take all your coursework, and you come out, and let's say you want to take the exam in 3 weeks, or 3 months, I should say. You feel like, I've taken all the classes, I'm fluent. Let me get to practice questions. Well, as someone who's taught BCBA coursework at the college level, especially ethics, which was my main course I taught, It doesn't really prepare you for the exam. The idea is to prepare you to be an analyst, but it's not preparing you for the exam. And RBTs are even worse because many RBTs don't have backgrounds in this field. So you're learning all this stuff fresh. As the BCBA candidate, don't be overconfident about what your ABA coursework taught you. You need to spend at least the first 2 weeks of study time, regardless if you plan to spend 3 months, 6 months, a year, looking at fluency and nothing else. Don't even do questions. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to start rushing. It's going to become overwhelming, and that motivation is going to drop. So where do we want to start? We can start with our SAF meds, which if you don't know, it's say all fast, a minute every day, shuffled. Empirical, data-driven way of doing flashcards. You have your terms, you take your flashcards, you set a timer for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and you say out loud the term and you say out loud the definition. And you see how many you can do within a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and then you shuffle. This is something you should do throughout the day. So we provide flashcards, both online or that you can print out, and it's something that you need to be doing throughout the day. Those first 2 weeks of study time, whenever you get a minute, on your phone, if you like physical flashcards, do it, right? I know you're scrolling on TikTok and Instagram for hours every day. We all do it. Take 5 of those minutes and go do the SAF Ed instead. And this is a quick way to really get good at the exam. You need to be able to recall the term and the definition, okay? We do a lot of practice questions, and a lot of our practice questions are based on just identifying terms. And people sometimes say these are too easy. And that's good. If you get to a point where you're answering questions and you feel they're too easy, that's a good place to be, because on your exam, they're not going to ask you, define for me stimulus equivalence. They're going to want you to apply that definition. And so once you've done your SAF meds, once you've done your terms and definitions, teach someone else the term. At the end of the day, your role and job as a BCBA is going to be to teach. You're going to teach parents, you're going to teach RBTs, you're teaching your clients, you're teaching paraprofessionals, teachers, and everybody else. You're going to be teaching them. And you're going to have to find a way to make our complicated terminology make sense. And if you can do that for somebody else, then you have a deep understanding of what the term and definition is or are. Another way to do that is throughout your day, start applying what you've learned. So let's say you did some SAF meds in the morning and you've got 2 or 3 terms that you may have been struggling with. Well, start looking around at things in your life that apply to those terms. Let's say you're struggling with an abolishing operation and motivating operations. We'll start thinking about your day-to-day and what's changing the value of consequences and apply it like that. But the focus is still on 100% fluency. And when we say 100%, you need to be about 100% on that task list, okay? If you look at our study guide that we have, we are the basic terms and definitions. And again, if you're familiar with the Cooper book, the white book, the ABA Bible, it goes very deep into many of these terms. And you don't need to go that deep, right? So some of our common mistakes, 1 is neglecting easy material, and 2, prioritizing overcomplicated material. What happens is you look again at the simple definitions, quote unquote simple definitions, because you just graduated, you got your master's, or you finished your supervision hours, and you're saying, I don't need to practice basic reinforcement schedules. Those are easy. Let's go look at response induction and stimulus generalization. By neglecting those simple ideas, right? Not only are you missing the building blocks for the harder ideas, but you might forget, right? Or you might not know as much as you think about basic reinforcement schedules. Now, on the other hand, if you are fluent in basic reinforcement schedules, then you can also go down a rabbit hole in, let's say, the Cooper book, where you're trying to learn every little granular deal or idea about these basic schedules. And so it's really a balance between don't neglect anything on the task list, but don't go deeper until you're actually 100% fluent and what the task list is asking you. And so if you were to look at our study guide and you go down the pages we have, until you're 100% fluent with the basics, there's no reason to dig into Cooper and go way too deep on these ideas. And then finally, rushing into practice questions, right? Until we've got that fluency, there's no need to do practice questions because you're not going to do them correctly. You're not going to review them, and you're going to get them wrong. And you're going to start rushing. So let's talk about how we do attack questions. Now, let's assume we spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right? There's no set schedule. Again, study schedules that you don't make yourself are very dangerous, okay? If you go and you talk to somebody and they say, oh, in 4 months, you'll be fine. That's a problem, right? Some of the best BCBAs I've ever known took a year to study, okay? Not because they couldn't do it, but that's how long they felt. I also know BCBAs who took a month to study and passed. It's individualized. So we're looking at your fluency. Once you're fluent, you're, let's say, 90% of the way there, and I can ask you something, and you can tell me the term, the definition, and explain it to me. Now we get to questions, okay? And not full practice exams yet, although a baseline exam isn't the worst thing. But we're just talking about individual questions. And how do we attack questions? How do we think about questions? I'm going to check the chat real quick. Do you think the passing rate has something to do with it being graded on a curve versus now it's not? That's an interesting question. So if you've ever looked at the methodology on how they score the exam, it's all subjective in a way where they've got subject matter experts who review all the questions. And they essentially go through each question and they say a person who would pass the exam has this much of a chance of getting this question right. In other words, it's not necessarily curved, but there is each question is a set percentage of who they believe will get it right and wrong. And so sometimes, depending on what that passing is, let's say you score a 397, you might have just been on the wrong side of what they felt was the standard, okay? And the thing is they haven't changed the questions, the question bank, and since the task list was updated, which is this year. So we're not really going to know that until we get the 25 data. But it's an interesting question. I wouldn't look into too much on how they grade the exam because, again, they're not going to give their methodology away. I always say you want 85% or higher on full mock exams. When people start getting 85% or higher on our mock exams, they start passing the exam. Okay, we don't know why, but there is a correlation there. Good question. Okay, so back to this. All right, we're fluent. We are 90% to 95% fluent, and now we want to drill questions. Number one, when you're practicing questions, this is practice, okay? If you take 10 minutes to answer one question, that's okay. It's practice, right? It's not a speed test. You're not going to be graded on it. If you do a question, your only priority for that question is to get it correct, okay? So how do we do it? What we want to do is we want to read the question once, read the question again, predict answer choices, and practice without answer choices. Let's look at an example, okay, from one of our recent practice question videos. What I would do here is I would read this one time. So an adult client is asked to make a shopping list. They're observed to be writing down every item they see in a magazine rather than items they need to buy. Behavior analyst notes the client's behaviors under the control of written words in the magazine. This is a failure to establish what? So I would stop there, right? And I would not even look at the answer choices. Notice I don't have answer choices because the mistake people want to make is they read the question super quickly, then they jump to the answer choice like the right one's going to jump out and say, this is the right answer, right? And that's not how it's going to happen. So you've read it once, and then we ask ourselves, what is the question asking? They want to know what did this fail to establish? Let's go back and start gathering information. We now know the question wants to know, what have we failed to establish? Let's gather information. An adult client is writing down every item they see in a magazine rather than the items they need to buy. The behavior is under control of written words in the magazine. What do we know? We know the behavior is under control of the wrong thing. It's under the words or the items in the magazine rather than the items they need to buy. And from there, we predict the answer. And you might say, well, that's going to take longer, but this is practice, right? And what we're doing is working on identifying what's important in these questions and then actually applying what we're learning when we're becoming fluent, okay? What we're not doing is rushing to the answer choices. We didn't read that question as quick as we could, jump to the answer choices, didn't know the answer, so we go back and reread the question, and then we read it again, and now we've read the question 4 times. That's going to take longer than reading the question, slowing down, and just attacking the question, making a prediction. If you find yourself reading a question 4, 5, 6 times, stop yourself and acknowledge you're not actually gathering any information, right? You're hoping the right answer appears, and it's just not going to do that on the exam. One thing that the exam is very good at, and back to how the exam is graded, is they have a lot of smart people review these questions. It's very good at testing your fluency and your application. There's really no figuring it out on the exam. And that's why it's so hard, is you either know it or you don't, okay? So back to our question, right? We've read it once, we've read it twice, we've gathered information, and our prediction is the problem is the behavior is under control of the magazine rather than the items they need to buy. So there's a lack of control somewhere. We made a prediction, and now we can get to our answer choices. If we look at A, point-to-point correspondence, first, if we're fluent, we know point-to-point correspondence is associated with verbal behavior, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. We can mark that off. If we look at B, stimulus control, our prediction had to do with control of the behavior, and the behavior is under stimulus control of the magazine rather than the items. B looks pretty good. C, formal similarity, same issue as A. We can mark it off. D, response generalization. So D, response generalization, again, if fluent, you could acknowledge that generalization is not the issue here. We're not even established the skill yet. And so we can safely assume B is our answer. Now, you might look at that and say, I know the answer. Of course, it's going to be easy for me. And again, that's the wrong approach. Take this strategy and go do some questions, RBT or BCBA, whatever you're preparing for, afterwards. Cover up the answer choices. Read the question once. Okay, what is it asking me? Gather information, make predictions. And the only way to get better at this is to slow down and actually practice, okay? The idea that you need to do 20 questions in an hour to get better at the exam is completely wrong. What you need to do is to get as many questions as you can correct in an hour. So yes, easy question, but if this question takes you 10 minutes to answer, that's okay. So the next thing becomes, what happens if we get the answer wrong, okay? What people don't want to do is review their mistakes, right? That's one of the biggest things people hate doing, is reviewing their mistakes. Nobody likes to admit when they're wrong. I hate admitting when I'm wrong. You hate admitting when everyone does, right? So reviewing your mistakes is not necessarily a fun thing, okay? It also takes a lot of time. You probably feel you're not learning much, but practice is pointless if you're not learning from your mistakes, okay? I think motivating operations give the most problems to both RBTs and BCBAs, right? For some reason, it's a very difficult concept to grasp, especially for RBTs. But BCBAs, when we get really into the weeds as far as establishing and abolishing operations go, it can become very tricky, okay? What is the MO? What is the SD? How does it relate to the consequence? It gets challenging. So people want to put it off, which is fine. But when you do get a question or you start working at it, you've got to practice what you're struggling with, okay? If we're not learning from the mistakes, that's a problem. So what do we do when we miss a question? Let's say I plan to do 10 questions. Okay, I've got 45 minutes before I go to work, or 45 minutes before I have a date. So I'm going to do 10 questions in 45 minutes. What's the problem there? Well, like we talked about, it's not about the number of questions, right? It's about, are we getting them right? And are we reviewing them? If you've got 45 minutes and you only do 3 questions, but you get 2 of them correct, and you spend the rest of the time reviewing the one you got wrong, that's much more productive than doing 10 questions, getting 5 right, getting 5 wrong, and not reviewing any of them, okay? So number 1 is, why are the wrong answers wrong, okay? Why is point-to-point correspondence incorrect? Well, it's verbal behavior, and point-to-point is when the responses match identically, right? If I say hello, you say hello. Hello is identical. So it has nothing to do with this. Form of similarity, again, verbal behavior. Form of similarity, the 2 verbal behaviors, form is the same, right? Written and written, spoken and spoken, etc. Response generalization, where we are generalizing responses to a stimulus, again, have nothing to do with these. And we know that, but we've also just gone through each one of these terms again and reinforced or reestablished our fluency. So not only have we practiced stimulus control, we've also practiced point-to-point, form of similarity, and response generalization. So you're actually killing a bunch of birds with one stone by approaching it this way. I know why stimulus control is correct. I know why these are wrong. And I've spent 5 minutes on this question, and look how much you've learned doing it this way, rather than going here, rushing through the question, getting it right and moving on, or let's say getting it wrong and saying, oh, I knew it, I just read it too quickly. You're not gaining anything. Guessing, we don't want to guess, okay? Now, when you get to test day, and whether you're RBT or BCBA, and you feel like you don't have enough time and you're running out of time, the only time you really should be guessing is if you've got a minute left and you just want to fill out the exam, okay? But if you're prepared, you really should be able to finish in no time. RBTs who prepare and use our materials and really are prepared, they can finish with 30 minutes left on their exam, okay? It's not unheard of. What you don't want to do is get to a question and guess, especially practice, okay? There is no reason to guess and practice. You're not getting points. You're not getting rewards. Those questions don't mean anything other than make yourself better. So to guess just to move on accomplishes nothing. Now on the exam, there are different strategies, right? And you want to flag questions, but we're talking about practice here, okay? So guessing is a no-no, right? If you don't know the answer, that's okay. Work as long as you need to. If you give up, now we go to review. How do we review? Just like we did. Go to each answer choice, look at the terms, the keywords, look up the definitions, put those 2 together, understand why it's wrong, figure out the right answer, why is that one right? And again, you're saying that's taking, let's say, 5 more minutes than just doing the question. It's 5 minutes you spent studying and learning rather than rushing and gaining nothing, okay? So reviewing your mistakes is critical. This is the part other than actually taking full-length exams that people skip. People want to say, oh, I review my mistakes. Yeah, I know why I was wrong. I was just reading too quick, or I was 50-50 and I guessed wrong, or I knew it was that one, I just picked the wrong answer. Honesty's huge here, okay? You're holding yourself accountable. No one else is. And that's really the key on this exam. It's a good test of accountability. Are you going to hold yourself accountable for your studying, okay? So with that, let's think about our question again and how we would go through it. We would go through the question. I'm stuck. What do? I stop here. I look at A. I go look up point-to-point correspondence, whether on my study guide or Cooper, whatever I'm using. And okay, that's what point-to-point means. Does it apply here? No. Same thing with stimulus control. Same thing with form of similarity. Same thing with response generalization. So all in all, through this presentation, we've spent 7, 8 minutes on this one question. But think about what all we've learned. We've learned all about point-to-point, form of similarity, response generalization, and stimulus control. It's not wasted time. Wasted time would have been me doing 4 questions in a row, drilling you, and then moving on. We don't learn anything. All you learn is, okay, I got 2 correct and 2 incorrect. and then you move on and you forget what the question even was. Okay. Not about speed. It's about getting them correct, building fluency, and reviewing those mistakes. Now, finally, and this one is probably with our methodology, how we differ the most, especially from some of the other big names in the industry. We talk about the score report, okay? And if you've taken your exam before, some of you may have, I think somebody in here said they're a multiple test taker. That's great. You get a score report at the end, okay? And when we look at that retake and it's at 25%, it always makes me laugh because people put all this stock into the score report and then nobody passes when they retake it, or it takes them 6 times to pass when they retake it. The score report, I don't even think they should give when you do fail the exam. It really tells you nothing, more or less, okay? Because what it does, and this is the BCBA breakdown, right? We have our domains, and this is the number of questions from each domain on the exam. So what people will do is say, okay, I have 8 questions from behaviorism and philosophical foundations. I don't have to focus too much on that because it's only 8 questions. But let's say behavior change procedures. Now, I got to really focus because that's where most of the questions come from. You know where most people miss all their points is here and here, right? Those 3 areas, okay, that seemingly have the least amount of questions. And why? Everything we just talked about. They want to neglect those during their study, okay? They don't think they're that important. Then what happens is they get their score report back, and what the score report shows you is you, let's say, quote unquote, passed A and B and C, you failed D. That's basically what it's telling you. It doesn't tell you what questions you missed. It doesn't tell you the ideas. The RBT ones, it gives you a giant list of what you need to work on. It's basically just the task list. And so people come back and they take that and they say, okay, I failed D and I did really good on E, F, G. Okay, so I just want to focus on D and I. So what they do is they focus on D and I for a month, they take it again, and what happens is they fail it again because only 25% retakers pass it. And they come back and they said, okay, I did great on D, but I failed F and G. Okay, you see what I'm getting at here? We're not focused on one individual task list because you're doing this so you become a behavior analyst, and as a behavior analyst or an RBT even, you've got to apply everything on the task list. So throw all of this out the window. It does you no good. And if you just want to break it down to numbers, if we have 175 questions, right? 185 with the pilot questions, okay? Why not take quote unquote easy stuff and get all of those right? In theory, okay, we don't know what the percentage to pass is because they're not going to tell us, but let's just say the percentage to pass is you need 90% of the questions correct. Each question is worth a point, right? You don't lose points for not getting one right. You just don't get that point. So in theory, you don't even have to answer all the questions to pass, okay? Because in theory, you just have to get a certain amount correct. Point being is this data doesn't really tell you anything. What am I supposed to do knowing that 13, 14, 12, and 14% of the exam is focused on the task list? We already know that. The whole exam is the task list. Ignore the score report. Ignore the after exam if you fail score report, and focus on fluency on the whole task list. And how do you do that? Is by the method we just talked about. Each time you do a question, you review. And then when you take a mock exam, okay, which you should be doing, and you should take all the mock exams for your exam, ideally, right? I know everyone has lives and time and things like that, but you've got to take a few. That mock exam is just a treasure chest of valuable information. It's going to tell you what questions you missed, which ones you got, and forget about, oh, I got a lot of the questions from the ethics correct, but not from implementing interventions. I don't have to review ethics. It's not how we're thinking. We are just looking at each question in its own bubble and reviewing those questions. So when you have a mock exam of 175, 185 questions, now you've got a whole treasure trove of questions to review. Again, this is our opinion, and this is what we've seen, and we think a big part of those retake failures, based on what we've seen, is you come and you say, I failed D and I, you focus all your time there, then you fail the other sections. It's not about gaming the exam. It's about learning the whole task list and applying it when it's time to do on test day. Okay, so I think I might right be at time. I've gone over a little bit. I'm not really sure, but at this point, we'll take a few questions. We have a couple questions already. Let's see. We have Ada. I took in December, missed by 4 points. Took last month and missed by 20. Very discouraging. That is not unusual, right? So what we typically tell people in those situations, if you miss by 10 or less points, okay, your fluency's close. We need to work a little more on questions, okay? Now, I don't know how, Ada, you study, but going from 4 to 20, it's a big drop, but it's not uncommon, okay? Those kind of drops aren't uncommon for a lot of the reasons we just talked about. Regina, just keep a steady pace. It took me 7 years. Anyone can do it. Absolutely. That's the good news, is you can keep going, okay? If you have the determination, you can keep going. We want you to pass as quick as you can, but you can keep going. Donna, do you need to pass each section of the TCO at a certain percentage? No, it's based on, again, we don't know what the actual criterion is to pass, but in theory, you can miss, let's say, half of the ethics questions and still pass. Any advice on how to differentiate between two correct answers and decide which one the board wants? You always want the best answer, okay? And that's going to come down to fluency and being able to look at two answers, and because that's a common issue, right? I'm always narrowing down questions to either one of two answers, okay? It's not uncommon. First, you're starting with what's the best answer, all right? Sometimes it's not always a great answer. Second, and this is important, is you only want to use the information supplied to you in the question, okay? Especially if you've worked in the field a long time, everyone wants to bring in their own outside experiences and opinions. Each of these questions is written in a bubble, and the information provided is all you want to use, okay? That's where you want to start, right? What's my best answer? And then I'm only using the information given, not necessarily outside experience or personal experience, but only information given. From there, if you're on test day and you still can't decide, go ahead and flag the question. If you are practicing and you're between two correct answers, don't move on. Do what we talked about. Go through, go review each answer choice, look at the terms, look at the definitions, and then work it out until you get that right answer. If it takes you 20 minutes, it takes you 20 minutes. Doing that will make you better at the exam. Do you think we should be timing ourselves with questions a little more once we start taking mocks, or get that out of your head and just focus on the fluency and correctness of the question? Yeah, I wouldn't even time yourselves taking practice questions. The timer is going to be irrelevant. It should be irrelevant, okay? Don't worry about the time, because if you're prepared, you don't need to worry about the time. People run out of time and they pass, okay? People pass with an hour left. RBTs, when they prepare correct, they take the test extremely quickly. Timing yourselves on especially individual questions is just going to lead to more issues. You're going to start the rush. You're not going to review, okay? Forget about the timer. The timer means nothing. Your only job is to get that answer correct. And if you don't get it correct, is to review that question. Now, the only time you should be using a timer is when you take those full mock exams, which is a necessity. You have to take full-length simulated mock exams before test day. Good question. How do you go from maintaining scores to passing? 386 last two times tested. Under 390, I would always tell you go back to fluency. You have to up your fluency and you have to up your application, meaning go do fluency work, and then those words that you're particularly struggling with, get fluent, and then start teaching them to other people, okay? Anything under 390, from what we've seen, indicates still a lack of fluency. Of course, I don't know you or your particular areas of need or knowledge, but from past results, we see anything under 390 is still a fluency problem. Natasha, do you have fluency flashcards for purchase instead of getting the whole package? Yeah, you can purchase just our study guide and flashcards if you would like. You can also email me after this and we can discuss. Ada, I bought your course last year and did all the videos. Watched all the videos, new task list as soon as you post. Do I need to buy your task list 6 course? If you're taking task list 6, and if you've already bought my course, then email me and we can give you the task list 6 items. But it's a good question. If you're taking the task list 6 exams, we need to be practicing task list 6 items. Virginia needs to be 70% each section, but no longer. I see most people are doing low on A, C, and I now. I got 384, 381, 381 in the past, so you will do it for sure. Yep. Awesome, Regina. Again, forget the sections. Your job is to get those questions right. And Regina's a good example. 384, consistent. And then that last time she passed. That's awesome. Congrats. Just pace yourself, 50 questions an hour and move on. I agree with fluency. Do you, anyone, one-on-one study sessions for purchase? You can email me and we can try and set something up. Ladies, how long should we wait until we take the exam again? Again, that's up to you. I don't like to give personalized advice without knowing you, but you want to give yourself time to recoup and prepare, okay? Don't rush back just because you want to get it done, right? This is not a get it done situation. Ideally, if you're becoming a BCBA, this is going to be your career for a long time. If you're becoming an RBT, maybe you want to go further in the field. Don't rush it, okay? Time goes quickly. It really does. And before it's going to be a year from now. And there's no reason to just drill and kill and try to take as many times as possible. Take it when you're ready, okay? Take it when you feel ready again. Regina is a good example here. Take a multiple test taker, got better and better, 15 months. You know what? Now she passed, okay? She's done. Nobody cares how long it took. Doesn't matter. That's a great example, okay? It's not about doing it quickly. It's about doing it and getting it right and achieving that goal. Great questions. Really good questions.
It looks like we've got a hand raised, so I'm going to allow Jessica's mic. Jessica, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm taking my BCABA exam for the second time on Monday. And I noticed that some of the subjects that I got the lowest was the supervision relationship and intervention development. And I feel that perhaps the reason why is because most of the material that I'm studying is based on BCABA. So maybe I'm a little bit confused on what exactly I'm responsible for as a BCABA of the things that I can and cannot do. So is there like a specific maybe materials or things that I can prepare mentally so I know what my part is as a BCABA and not a BCBA?
A good question. As a BCABA, you more or less have the same responsibilities as the BCBA. What I would do is to really hone in on what your responsibilities are, is go to the BACB website and review that BCABA handbook pretty thoroughly. And that's going to give you a good idea of what you should and shouldn't be doing, because the ethics are more or less the same, but it's a great point of what is your role compared to the BCBA. So the best place to find that is going to be the BACB website and just review that BCABA handbook and then even compare it to the BCBA handbook and look for any discrepancies. And I think that'll put you on the right track.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thanks.
All right. Do we have any other questions? All right. So it was awesome having you on here. And I'm personally not a clinician. I have no desire to go take the RBT or BCBA exam, but I feel like I learned more about test taking on this webinar than I did in like all my study skills courses in college and stuff like that. So I think that this This seems like it'd be very helpful for anybody that's taking these exams. So make sure you go subscribe to his YouTube channel. If you see the contact information on the screen, make sure you reach out. This seems like it'd be very helpful. So I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. This was one of our best webinar turnouts, and it seems like it's really helpful. You have any last tips that you want to give?
No, thanks for having me. I
Cool.
appreciate it. Good luck to everyone, and yeah, just keep at it. It is a lot of ways of testing persistence. Keep at it.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for showing up. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.